Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill sitting here Sunday morning looking at a game that we've talked about a lot over the last couple months. USC heading on the road to the big house against Michigan. Dill, the way I look at this football game, heck of a lot different than we talked about this football game 2 months ago. You look at this Michigan offense, obviously trying to find their identity, trying to find their starting quarterback. Not sure who we're going to see on Saturday. I would guess it's going to be Alex Orji. Then you look at this USC defense. I think our biggest question mark 2 months ago about this football game was, can USC hold up along the defensive line against Big Ten teams like Michigan? It's a small sample size, only 2 games, but though they certainly have answered the bell. In this defense under Coach Lynn, we've talked about it a lot over the last couple of weeks. It looks and feels different. The physicality is different. The communication, the lack of blown coverages is different. This USC team has looked awesome throughout their first 2 games. Michigan, obviously not so much. Fired up to get into this one. Now, before we do, and as always, one, the boys are Michigan fans. So the Michigan fans, y'all continue to show the boys a ton of love. Appreciate you guys. The USC fans, like, y'all know this is a program I love talking about. The amount of fight-ons, the amount of sport y'all show, it means the absolute world. We've been looking forward to talking about this game for a long time. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. That is the best part about doing these game predictions. Appreciate you guys. And Dill, without further ado, I feel like we got to start with this Michigan offense going up against the USC defense. That's legit. And I think the most I wouldn't say surprising, but I think the most important thing to talk about is this USC defense, although maybe smaller in the middle of the defensive line with guys like Nate Clifton at 295, Gavin Mayer, I think only 290, though they've played extremely tough throughout the first 2 games. We kind of assumed this game would look like Michigan controlling the line of scrimmage, controlling the clock, kind of winning how they won in 2023. My confidence in Michigan doing that is not as much as it was 2 months ago, having not only seen what we've seen from Michigan, but also what this USC defensive line has been.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it starts with is like I thought LSU was going to be able to just run it up and down on USC, especially controlling the line of scrimmage. And again, there was, I think, one drive in the third quarter that kind of looked like that I thought that whole game was going to look like. But aside from that, I think you're right. I mean, even though Gavin Meyer, Nate Clifton, smaller guys, but they're playing really tough. They're playing physical. And I think, frankly, a lot of it is the linebacker play for USC is on a completely different plane. I mean, you take a look at Eric Gentry, the progress he's made over the past year, and he's pretty much said, oh, this is just all coaching. I mean, he's playing like a different player. Mascarenas Arnold is a stud. We kind of knew he'd be a stud. But just the physicality.
Mason Cobb, that's Oklahoma State Mason Cobb. Sorry I know he missed the Utah State game, but like Mason Cobb against LSU, that's what we thought we were going to get in 2023. You're right. The linebackers have been great. Still, speaking of linebackers, I was kind of, when I was like previewing this game, thinking about some of the key matchups. Do you think USC goes to some 3 linebacker sets? Like, we know the base package for Coach Lynn is the nickel, so having only 2 linebackers, 5 defensive backs. Dill, I think the biggest problem / question mark with this Michigan offense is the lack of vertical passing attack. If you're USC, you're looking at this football game, you're looking at how much Michigan might be starting Alex Orji, but more importantly, goes to a lot of 12 personnel using 2 tight ends. You got 3 really good linebackers that they clearly want to get on the field at the same time. Do you think USC not only walks the safety into the box, but also might go with 3 linebackers for a majority of this football game to try to deal with what Michigan's going to try to do running the football?
Yeah, and that will be kind of the interesting thing is you pretty much know what Michigan's going to do. I don't really think you have any choice at this point. Like, I don't see the vertical passing game being particularly good. Nothing about these 3 games for Michigan makes me think that's going to change a whole lot. If anything, it's probably going to go the opposite direction because they're probably going to lean into Orji, lean into this run game. Now, I will say, if you want to run the risk of playing the 3 linebacker look, I do think Michigan with Alex Orji can spread you out horizontally a little bit more. So I think you need athleticism on the field. Eric Gentry is certainly the guy you look for to be that guy who can stretch it from the linebacker spot. Because I don't know that Mason Cobb or Mascarenas Arnold are the greatest athletes at that linebacker position in the world. So that'll probably be what I'm looking for. If they jump down and really try to play heavy, how can Michigan at least get the ball or stretch the ball horizontally? Because somehow they're going to need to create some space and try to open something up where they can just bang on USC.
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking is, so like if you were to take Rudy Vance off the football field, where I think Rudy Vance is a great nickel. I don't love the idea of taking him off the football field. That being said, Eric Gentry, from an athleticism standpoint, can kind of give you those nickel vibes. Like, yes, he's 6'6", but he's only 225 pounds soaking wet. And so you talk about potentially the best player to take away some of these Michigan tight ends like Colston Loveland is probably Eric Gentry, but also to give you a little bit more run-stopping ability. Hey, Coach Lynn, what I think I love about Coach Lynn the most, and the USC fans know this, like, he's just going to look at his players. He's going to look at the matchup and say, where can I get the best out of these guys? And I think a 3 linebacker set might look the best for USC to deal with Michigan in the heavy boxes that Michigan is going to give. Now, they'll flipping sides to Michigan. It's obviously going to be run heavy, especially if it's Alex Orji. Like, I don't think that's a secret. There's 2 really big keys. One, can you find some sort of wrinkle that you haven't put on the film yet with Alex Orji? 2 running back sets, whether Alex Orji is doing something different. You got to be creative. Like, if you're going to have Alex Orji at your quarterback spot and you know you're going to be very run heavy, you got to give a lot of different looks and a lot of different kind of bag of tricks in terms of how you want to run the football. So that's number one. Number two, if USC does want to bring their safeties in the box, potentially play with 3 linebackers, I'm not saying Michigan has to throw the football 30 times a game, and that's not even that much. But when you do want to throw the football, can you hit an explosive play or 2 to change this game? That's probably the one question where you kind of feel like Michigan's got to hit a play or 2 to win this football game. Can Alex Orji and these wide receivers do that? That's probably the question here.
Yeah, and that'll be obviously one huge thing will be Colston Loveland's health, because he is still a guy, I think, again, if you want to play a certain way, he's been a matchup nightmare. He's been really, really hard to deal with. I kind of look, Mason Taylor did a pretty good job working against that USC team. I think Colston Loveland's a little bit better than, frankly, Mason Taylor. So that'll be kind of what you think you're looking for. I do think Michigan still got guys at that tight end position, even if Colston Loveland doesn't happen to play, that can be dangerous. I think Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen, it was nice to see him get out there. Even a guy like Brady Prescorn. You have a pretty stable depth or a good depth of talent in that tight end room. But that'll be, frankly, the position I think Michigan has to lean on to stretch the field at the end of the day, because I just don't see the wide receiver position making a ton happen against what I would consider very, very good corners.
Yeah, these corners have been very good. One thing that I was looking at, kind of looking at some of the numbers, USC's completion percentage they've given up is 72%. Now only like 5.6 yards per pass. So that it's been very good. They're kind of like, hey, we're going to give you the short stuff, but we're going to come up and tackle. Can Michigan routinely hit some of those short completions? Then can you count on a guy like Samaj Morgan to maybe make something happen in space? Again, USC's tackled way better than they did in 2023 in space. And so, I think USC feels comfortable there. But if you're Michigan, you got to have some of your playmakers make plays. I think that's kind of the end of the discussion for this Michigan.
I think that you need them to make plays, because at the end of the day, if USC doesn't need to at least respect the option of doing something on the boundary, whether that's the screen game, whether that's hitting a play over the top, whether that's getting your tight ends up the seam, if they can't threaten at all down the field or at least go sideline to sideline and open up something, I mean, I don't see what Michigan can do. I do still think I'd be really interested to see if you can just lean on USC for a whole game, because LSU threw the ball a lot against USC.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised they didn't just try to wear that team down, grind them down. Michigan's pretty much shown a propensity that they're really comfortable doing that, even if it's like they're not moving the ball. Like, even against Texas, they're just still going to run it. It doesn't matter what's going on. I still want to see if USC can stop that for 4 quarters, because LSU, to my surprise, really, I don't think totally made it.
I think the key here is like Michigan's got to win the way they did in 2023. And that means maybe if it's ugly in the first half, but you're kind of having those body blows, kind of getting to the depth of the defensive line, and then it kind of the floodgates open in the second half. That's kind of what you're looking for. But and able to do that, you got to stay on the football field. And that's what Michigan has failed to do. Like, a lot of 3-and-outs, not a lot of snaps on the offensive side of the football. That's not the winning recipe for this Michigan program. They'll moving over to the USC offense against this Michigan defense. I think there's one massive key, and that is getting to Miller Moss with 4. Miller Moss is exceptional when he's blitzed. And Wink Martindale, look, there's a reason I'm not a defensive coordinator for Michigan. But I look at the numbers and say, guess what Miller Moss is really good at? When he has pressure in his face, when you want to bring extra bodies on that blitz, he knows where to go. He knows where his hots are, and he gets the football to his playmakers, and they're able to make some plays. Miller Moss has been exceptional against the blitz. If you're Michigan, you want to see if this defensive line can get pressure with 4 where, look, USC's offensive line has been pretty dang solid. The one question mark we had with Mason Murphy at right tackle, I think has been really good the first 2 games. And I do think this is the best defensive line that USC will have faced up to this point. That's where I'm kind of curious that if Wink Martindale brings a lot of blitz packages, I think Miller Moss can hurt you. But if you can show that you can win with your front four, that's probably the best avenue to stopping this USC team, because if you start getting some one-on-one matchups in the back end, like, yes, Will Johnson can lock up one of these wide receivers. Well, there's 5 or 6 wide receivers that can make plays. Lincoln Riley and Miller Moss are going to find those wide receivers. So I think my big key is, can Michigan, with their starting 4, get pressure on Miller Moss?
Yeah, and I'm not totally ready to call this a wrap, let's say, on how good USC's offensive line was. I mean, I'm not totally impressed with LSU. I thought even in that South Carolina game, I mean, that's
it's very fair.
Offensive line, and they did enough to score a lot of points, let's say. So again, I'm not totally ready to think that USC can just handle this Michigan team. And Michigan's defensive line is still really good. Texas actually has a great offensive line. We all kind of knew that coming in, and they did a pretty good job. But Michigan still was doing a decent job creating pressure. I'll just be looking, can they get Miller Moss to the ground? Can he make the plays that Quinn Ewers was making, moving on, creating some space? Because that's really how Michigan was getting hurt. I thought for the most part, Michigan's defense looked good in that game. Again, on those 3rd and longs, they just weren't getting off the field because Quinn Ewers was making things happen. That'll be something I think Miller Moss needs to make happen, because I do think this Michigan team is going to get some pressure on them.
Yeah, and to give Miller Moss some credit, I do think he's much more of a playmaker than people give him credit for. Like, I think there was this idea of Miller Moss coming in, he's going to be a game managing quarterback, which, again, does he do the Houdini stuff that Caleb Williams did last year? No, absolutely not. But he is very good at climbing the pocket. He's very good at keeping his eyes downfield and standing in there. I'm just very curious to see if Wink Martindale decides to bring extra guys, because I think the best avenue for Michigan is, playing some zone coverage, trying to get after the quarterback with your front 4. And like you said, hey, when we can get after the quarterback, not letting the quarterback extend plays outside the pocket, because that is what got Michigan killed against Texas. Another thing that you're looking for USC is, and something that I've been really impressed with, the balance. Like, we kind of went back and looked at that Utah State game. It's not as an explosive offense than it was with Caleb Williams, but it's a lot more methodical. Like, they lean on some 2 tight end sets. They'll run the football. And if you're Michigan, I think one of the biggest concerns we have on the defense, like, our defensive line has played a lot. Like, there's obviously not a ton of trust in terms of the reserves on this Michigan defensive line. If USC can, sustain those 10, 11, 12 play drives like they were able to do against Utah State and at times against LSU, get to the depth of this Michigan defensive line, get Mason Graham and Kenneth Graham kind of sucking some wind, that is when Michigan's defense is at its worst. So if you're USC, you might not be hitting the 60-yard touchdown passes that Caleb Williams gave you last year, but can you methodically stay in the field and move the football and get to the depth of the front 7 of this Michigan defense? That's probably the other key that I'm looking for in this football game here.
And that's why I think Miller Moss being really, really efficient is going to be key, because I still think Michigan, they've been really good against the run, even against Texas. Not like Texas moved the ball a whole lot on the ground, especially not in between the tackles. So Michigan's still been tough there. I don't think USC is going to be able to run the ball particularly effectively, but that's where I think he gets to Miller Moss. I mean, they have so many weapons, so many different ways to hurt you. Can they win their one-on-one matchups on the boundary like Texas was able to do it? So when it wasn't Will Johnson, Texas was doing a good job picking on some of the other guys and making some things happen. So that probably is going to be what you're looking for, because I don't know that they'll be able to just pound on Michigan at the end of the day.
And
front 7's great.
And how about Lincoln Riley getting in his bag a little bit too? Like, we kind of highlighted this going into the Texas game. Coach Sark, a lot of pre-snap motion. Best way to slow a hyper-aggressive and athletic defense down, which Michigan has, give them some eye candy, get them taking some false steps. Coach Sark, one of the best offensive play callers in the game. Guess who else is a very good offensive play caller? Lincoln Riley. And so that battle between Wink Martindale and Lincoln Riley going to be intriguing as well. Dill, let's get to the pick here. USC coming into this game, into the big house. 6.5-point favorites. Who you got?
Give me the Wolverines. And I don't love Michigan to win this game because, again, I'm not wildly confident about what they're doing on the offensive side of the ball. But I like the idea, if they can go to the Alex Orji system, run the ball really, really steadily, and just see if USC can line it up and do that for 4 quarters, I kind of want to see it. I think Michigan is going to be a lot better than people think in this football game, just because, again, I mean, they've really struggled to kind of find what they can do on offense. I think we saw one drive, at least with Alex Orji, that if they can or if they can move the ball like they did in that drive in the third quarter when Alex Orji first came in, I think Michigan's offense can be good enough to be really competitive in most of their football games. Now, do I think they'll win this? I'd be really kind of surprised to an extent just because I don't see them moving the ball a ton, but I think this can be a pretty good rock fight, like something 17-20 or something.
If they can get this, that's kind of the key. And again, I'm a little bit more confident in USC winning a rock fight barroom brawl than it was 2 months ago.
If you would have told me this would be a rock fight 2 months ago, I'd be like, oh, that's an easy win for Michigan. But you're kind of right. I mean, USC's been much more physical, much more like just sound. I mean, they're playing sound football. They tackle, they don't blow coverages, just all those things that were getting them killed last year. They're really not doing them. So they can win, I think, more gritty, competitive football games like that LSU one was, frankly. It's not like they were running up and down on LSU at the end of the day. They were making the plays they needed to make to win, which they didn't do last year.
All right. As a Michigan fan, this one hurts me. I mean, I at the end of the day, I have to trust my eyeballs. What I've seen from, and I said the exact same thing for Tennessee, Oklahoma. Like it kind of feels like a trap, right? Tennessee's coming on the road to Oklahoma. They're 7.5-point favorites. I feel like I might be walking into a trap, but I look at USC. I look at what I saw from them against LSU and Utah State, and I look at Michigan, what I've seen from them throughout the first 3 games. I think USC is playing like the better football team. I think they have a better feeling of what they want to be as a football team. And I think that Michigan on offense is a little bit too one-dimensional. And I think Coach Lynn is going to be able to capitalize on that. Like bring your safeties in the box, potentially play with some 3 linebacker sets. And if Michigan, who has yet to show us that they can consistently push the ball down the field and hurt you, look, we said this to start the season for Michigan. If there is not a threat of a vertical passing attack and we are a super one-dimensional offense, you can't beat good defenses. I didn't think I'd be saying USC was a great defense at this point of the season, but I think they're a good defense. And so if we're one-dimensional like that, I don't trust Michigan to win this football game right now. Give me USC to cover the 6.5 points in the big house. Going to be a fun one. We'll recap it. 3:30 Eastern time kickoff. USC fans, I would love to hear if some of you guys are going to the big house. Phenomenal environment. Would recommend if you guys can make the trip. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. We'll get out of here and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.